And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime. We thank you for joining us. If you're asking the question, what is the show all about? Well, we bring you a forum discussing and providing deeper understandings of the issues and inequities that so many people face, from systemic inequalities to pressing problems that are in the social environment. Our guests provide multiple perspectives as well as insights to help us better understand and address all of these challenges. We invite you to stay connected with us as the Social Justice Forum starts right now. The United States Supreme Court made a historic decision, effectively terminating affirmative action in colleges and universities nationwide. The ruling significantly impacting how schools shape their student bodies, alter the application process for prospective students, and determine funding for programs and campus initiatives. Moreover, it compels companies to reassess their recruitment and hiring practices, rethink their efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, and overall overhaul corporate culture to enhance business goals. Here now, sharing more, is the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group, Patrick J. Boyd, and we are glad to have him with us. And Patrick, my friend, long time no see. Good to see you, brother.
Always a pleasure.
It's been a minute, but a lot has happened throughout the course of time as we talk about the Supreme Court ruling right here. A lot of people not surprised by it, even though it was a 6-3 majority decision there. First of all, let me, as a lawyer, your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think one of the points you made is an excellent one. Just to start with, the courts, of course, have oral argument before they render their decisions, and it was pretty clear, based on the political makeup of the court and the questioning in oral arguments, that the court was likely to challenge and overturn or render unlawful the admissions decisions or standards for the University of North Carolina and Harvard. So while I think the decision is disappointing to many, I think it is a decision we saw coming for a bit of time, just in light of the way the oral arguments were held, the questions asked, and certainly the political makeup of the court at this point as well.
Yeah. And so we take a look. Let's walk through this here. It was 6-3, majority ruling there, and we found a couple of key statements that were being made. Justice John Roberts, in making his determination, said that, quote, applicants, quote, must be treated based on his or her experiences as an individual, not on the basis of race, end quote. But when we really look at what affirmative action was really about, it was about race, but it wasn't in the way that it's being made. It's the law, but it's not the spirit of the law.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I mean, what the court is doing is looking at a basic reading of the Constitution, which of course prohibits the consideration of race to the advantage or disadvantage of anybody. But the spirit of the law and the spirit of the affirmative action protocols, which have been upheld for decades now, right, it is not to provide sort of an integrated classroom by virtue of race, but an integrated classroom by virtue of experience. I think that the court would say that their ruling is still consistent with that. Indeed, what the judges said was, well, it shouldn't be a decision based upon race, but if a student tenders her or his application for admission, and in the course of that application describes their race, their challenges as to diversity and inclusion and as to getting a fair chance, in that essay it can be considered a part of the makeup of the student itself, herself or himself rather, and as a result can be a factor in making the decision. So in some ways, the court is prohibiting sort of a box-checking mechanism of determining race and then trying to establish a classroom based upon it. But on the other hand, at least in the way the majority crafted the opinion, the understanding is not to discourage diversity, just to make it maybe a little harder to accomplish, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, now we look at it and the law's been passed and we know where things go from here in terms of when we look at those persons who may have had an opportunity to get to the classroom, that won't necessarily be the case. And from my perspective, as I've shared with other people on other platforms, this isn't about the admittance of unqualified persons. These are qualified people that you're you want to see have an equal opportunity, which is what the spirit of the law was giving way to. You have people who say,
Right.
listen, this decision has set the country back and has set students back for some time. How do you weigh in on the gravity of this decision?
I think your insight is a valuable one, and we don't have to guess at this completely, right? Certain states, including the state of California, took state-based initiatives to preclude affirmative action a while ago. And what we've seen as a result of those state-based steps is a decrease in the diversity of the classroom because, quite frankly, administrators are too concerned about being labeled as making the wrong race-based decision given the law. So I think the ramifications are going to be likely a decrease in the diversity in classroom, and I think that's an unfortunate trend, and I think most people would agree with that concept.
Yeah, you've got DEI, which is a huge part of the corporate makeup. And when you look at this decision right now, is there really a need for DEI when you've got a decision that's been made just like this? This is what some people are saying.
Well, I agree with you again, and I think our President Biden agreed with you as well in taking a position shortly after the decision, saying he strongly disagrees with it, and obviously he's not looking for any entity to operate in a way that is unconstitutionally just checking boxes on race, but. The president is suggesting initiatives for schools and for the private sector and public sector and employment that will find ways to make sure there is a diversity of experience expressed in the classrooms and in the public sector. I don't think it's going to be an easy path. I think the path has been made harder, but I do think there are solutions, just not necessarily the simplest or maybe the most thoughtful would be another way of looking at it.
Yeah. But on one side, you've got this decision that affects colleges and universities. On the other side, there's another conversation being had about how this really plays out in the corporate forum and how this will play out in the corporate forum. How can we expect to see this decision play out corporately?
My guess, and it is only a guess, is that to a certain extent the private sector is going to do what the private sector wants to do and what is politically popular. And so to the extent that they have embraced initiatives to start with, I don't see the private sector putting the brakes on that. On the other hand, to the extent that there are members of the private sector, and of course it's a diversified private sector in terms of political viewpoints, those that want to be a little bit less diverse or that care less about diversity, are probably going to stick to their guns in that respect too and be emboldened in doing so. I think Warren Buffett not that long ago gave a presentation and he was talking about his board of directors being majority white, majority old, majority men, and said they're the best performers and that's what he wants and that's it. So I think that political protocol and that political set of beliefs will be something that certain companies that felt that way to start with will be emboldened to continue to pursue and continue to express vocally and in practice.
Let me switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about another Supreme Court decision when the Supreme Court decision has rendered its verdict when it comes to religious accommodation. Now, people may not be so familiar with the religious accommodation, so Patrick, why don't we take the time just for a moment, for those who may not know what the law is all about, let's talk about what exactly is religious accommodation.
Sure. Well, certainly just as a basic constitutional framework, the freedom to express your faith and the freedom to pursue your faith is an important aspect of our Constitution. It's part of the First Amendment, of course. And for a long period of time, starting with the initial civil rights initiatives in '64, there was an articulated standard that employers had to offer some accommodations to allow employees to continue to pursue their religious beliefs, whether that's to give them a chance to keep holy the Sabbath on Sunday, or whether that's to get a chance for prayer room breaks for prayers during the course of the day. Seventh-day Adventists have a different kind of scheduling requirement also. So the initial civil rights laws were to provide for a workplace that accommodated the pursuit of and integrity of one's religious beliefs. In the 70s, there was a case that sort of changed things a little bit and basically said that an employer is supposed to accommodate but they don't have to accommodate a lot. In other words, they just need to give a sort of a de minimis accommodation to religious observance. So maybe they don't have to give somebody Sundays off. Maybe they don't have to give somebody time to go to a prayer room. That was a sort of a tough change in the law, but a long-standing one. This Supreme Court decision just recently related to a postal worker. He wanted to keep holy the Sabbath. That is, he didn't want to work on Sundays. He was attracted to the Postal Service because of that. But as a lot of us know now, the Postal Service will do deliveries for Amazon. So the U.S. Postal Service was asking him to work on Sundays. He tried to transfer to a different department where he didn't have to work on Sundays. He did that, but then they had to deliver on Sundays in that department also. He said, please accommodate me. Don't need to work on Sundays. They said, no, we won't. And so he was forced to resign. And the Supreme Court, at this time in a unanimous ruling, 9-0, held that the Postal Service needs to provide meaningful accommodations so that people can continue to be observant of their faith and engage in their profession at the same time. So a meaningful decision that way in favor of accommodations to workers and their religious practices, to the extent that those practices may intersect with the jobs they have.
Yeah, and so with the unanimous decision coming out of the Supreme Court, how often do we see that?
I would concur with you that it's not as common as we would like, but it's a very bifurcated world and a polarized world. So I'm pleased to see that this was a unanimous decision. I mean, frankly, one of the things that was most, I think, made this case so compelling was the structure of the entity. The Postal Service has employees. The Postal Service has resources. For the Postal Service to argue that it's an undue hardship just to give a religious worker Sundays off so he can observe the Sabbath strikes me as a tough argument to make. A small employer who maybe doesn't have the funds, doesn't have the employees, might be able to make a more compelling case, but the Postal Service didn't want to accommodate him and opened up the opportunity for the court to say that all kinds of accommodations should be given for religious freedoms, including breaks, schedule changes, interface of schedule changes with other people, and that's going to offer a lot more freedom for people to continue to pursue their faith in their jobs. It does regulate employers 15 employees or more, so it's not completely broad sweeping, but a lot of people will probably be a little bit more comfortable in articulating the need of their faith and expressing that faith in light of this decision, which I feel good about.
Yeah. We also have another Supreme Court decision to talk about, and that's the decision that affects free speech and LGBTQ rights, Creative LLC versus Elenis. And give us a little bit of a breakdown of what we saw here before that decision came down.
Sure. So the state of Colorado passed a law requiring that businesses not discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation. Lori Smith was a woman who was a web designer. She designed logos and those kinds of things. And she was also going to start designing and helping people plan and schedule and put online the advertisements for their weddings. The case came to light because an LGBTQ couple sought her services. Lori is a religious conservative and does not respect respect is not the right word, but did not want to provide that service to gay people because in her faith, a gay marriage is not a recognized marriage. So she did not want to design the wedding website and anticipated that the law would force her to. As a result, she brought this challenge to the law. And again, we had a 6-3 decision, but the 6-3 decision upheld her freedom to decline to help this particular couple in the planning of their wedding because of her religious and First Amendment rights.
Yeah, and seeing that wasn't a unanimous decision. We saw divided pretty much along the lines that we typically would see things.
That's right.
The ramification of which a law like this and the decision that was made, what can we see as the potential ramifications behind this?
Very interesting, and it's going to be very complex. At the end of the day, interestingly enough, Neil Gorsuch is the judge who wrote the majority opinion. He's also the one who wrote the opinion embracing gay rights in about half of the states of the United States that had not previously. So So Justice Gorsuch has been on sort of both sides of the gay rights equation. In this case, the court was taking the position that Ms. Smith and her freedom to practice her creative work how she wanted in the way she wanted was more important than the opportunity for this gay couple to have her do the work for them. Whether or not that translates to a business owner's freedom to choose to serve, work for, contract with people that they don't agree with or not, and the ramifications of it are still to be determined. The Gorsuch wrote, "The government may not interfere with an inhibited marketplace of ideas," quote unquote. And so the First Amendment cannot make Lori work for these people. Justice Sotomayor was very disappointed by this, and in her dissent wrote, "Time and again, businesses and other commercial entities claimed a constitutional right to discriminate, and the courts have stood up against that until today. Today, the court shrinks, period, full stop." So a local woman, Justice Sotomayor, felt very strongly that this was a wrong decision. And I think a lot of small businesses are going to be emboldened to try to serve different clients by virtue of this decision, and there's going to be a lot of litigation as a result.
Yeah, I got to get ready to get out of here in a few minutes, but I just want to get the opportunity to have you talk a little bit about this law, the the non-compete agreements happening here in New York State. A lot of people paying good attention to that. Real quickly, give us the breakdown on that one and where we stand.
Sure. So a lot of workers these days have a non-compete agreement that prohibits them from going to certain places after they leave their job, to the extent that the places may be places that are in competition with the places they're leaving. California prohibited these non-compete agreements, and now New York was looking to do the same thing. Legislature passed a bill on June 20th, and if the governor signs it into law within 30 days, any non-compete will be invalidated. That means if you leave one job and go to another, the job you cannot stop you from working in any place, even if the place you're going to is in competition with the place you've left. It's a meaningful freedom for employees, a meaningful freedom for the movement of labor, and one that's consistent with the federal initiative that our President Biden encouraged in an executive order about 1.5 years ago. Now, it hasn't been signed yet. But if it does, it's going to mean a lot of employees have a lot more ability to leave jobs and go to other jobs without fear of ramifications. So, to a large extent, it's a great decision, I think, for the labor markets and for the freedom of individual workers. One small note: the governor expressed support for a bill that was going to be doing this, but only as to lower wage workers. The law covers all employees, so I don't know if there may still be some tinkering with the bill or with the governor's decision on the subject, but a very important and momentous decision. And another place, quite frankly, where potentially our state is leading the way in adding freedoms for workers, which I think is something we can all feel good about.
Yeah, some will be paying very close attention to. Patrick Lloyd, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Patrick Boyd, who is the founding partner of the Boyd Law Group. If you want to find out more about him, but yes, in contact, you can get him at theboydlawgroup.com. And Patrick, thanks so much for being with us. All righty.
Great to see you again.
We're glad to have you. All right, taking a quick break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Where did the time go? Somehow I lost all those years. Where did the time go? I don't know how I got here. Oh, how did I get here? I can see now.
You've done the hard part. You quit smoking. Now do the easy part and get scanned for lung cancer. If you smoked, you may still be at risk, but early detection could save your life. Talk to your doctor and learn more at savedbythescan.org.
We all know what it's like to feel alone. But it just takes one new connection. Want to get out of here? To empower many.
This is unbelievable.
It doesn't take a superhero to bring forces together. We all have the power to reach out
Let's go!
and help someone feel like they belong.
Pretty cool, huh?
We are stronger together.
Most hiring algorithms would scream me out.
Some bosses couldn't see me as a leader.
I've run this place for 20 years, but I still need to prove that I'm more than what you see on paper.
I've been writing code as long as I've been able to reach a keyboard.
This is what I do. It's second nature for me, coordinating 100 details at once.
It's the way my mind works. I have a very mechanical brain.
I sold them on my skills.
You gotta be so good they can't ignore you.
My magic is
Analytics and empathy. That's how I'm getting clients. You have to have the confidence in yourself to show up and defy the odds.
I'm more than who I am on paper.
I never got a college degree. And today, I'm the CEO of my own company. People want to tell me I'm one in a million, when actually I'm one of millions. The stars are all around us. It's time for them to shine.
And welcome back. The Northern Manhattan Tenant Union originated as a collective of residents organizing within buildings owned by Sugar Hill Capital Partners. In both 2021 and 2022, executives from Sugar Hill Capital ranked number 1 and number 7, respectively, on the New York City Public Advocate's worst landlord watch list due to numerous building violations and evictions. Joining me now and sharing more is on this matter. We've got 2 members of the Northern Manhattan Tenant Union. We've got Adam Blazej and Joy Nelson, and thank you both for joining us here. I want to get the opportunity to talk a little bit about where you are and what is going on. And I guess I'll start off first with you, Adam. For those who may be in the city not knowing exactly where you're located, give us a little location.
Yeah, hi, thanks for having us on. My name's Adam, and I live in Inwood. I live on Cooper Street in Inwood, the tippy top of Manhattan.
And so when we talk about what's going on, we talk about the fact that you've got a union that is really coming together to really deal with the issues of no response to repairs and a multitude of things. But talk to us about the union.
Yeah, so the union started, as you said, as a coalition of tenants under the same landlord. The landlord is Sugar Hill Capital Partners, which is a private equity firm that owns something like 70 or so buildings, mostly in northern Manhattan, but also in central Brooklyn. And they manage their properties through management companies, one of which is Tri-Hill Management and another is Choice Management. So the coalition started as just tenants of Tri-Hill. So we were the Tri-Hill Tenants Coalition. And back in November, this is November 2022, Joy, myself, and some other tenant leaders who had been organizing for better housing conditions in our homes and on our blocks for some years, I think had realized that we were going up against something bigger than ourselves, and it was nothing that certainly one tenant could do, and perhaps nothing that one building could really address. That trying to seek justice and action from Sugar Hill Capital Partners really required a large group of tenants. So we started talking about tenants from half a dozen or a dozen different buildings from Inwood, Washington Heights, and Harlem, about the problems in our buildings, identifying patterns of problems. And one of the first things that we did together was we started a petition, collecting signatures for a petition to demand that New York Theological Seminary revoke an award that they gave to the president of Sugar Hill Capital Partners. They gave an Urban Angel Award to our landlord in 2022. And the point of the petition was to tell New York Theological Seminary that our landlord is nothing but an urban angel. Certainly not an angel, barely urban. And we collected signatures from about 400 tenants and other community members. And that was one of our first actions to sort of bring us together.
Yeah. Let me bring Joy in and talk a little bit about the residential conditions right now. What are those conditions? We hear a lot about what people are dealing with, but what are people actually contending with?
Well, for starters, again, I've been here 33 years, raised my kids and grandkids here. It used to be a beautiful dwelling until these people took over. Um, you can call for repairs and you would never speak to a person. You would speak to a machine and they'll wait a couple of weeks and then they'll close something they call a ticket, a work ticket. Uh, I've had awful experiences. We've had illegal scaffolding up for over 15 years with no explanation or nothing. Which attracted raccoons from Central Park. I live at 306 West 112th Street, between 8th and Manhattan Avenues. And so, I woke up one morning and the raccoon was trying to get in my window. I have one of my grandchildren are special needs. In addition to that, I'm not that fond of raccoons. I've come home. I have a catering business, and I've come home different times in the night. You find people having sex under the scaffolding. Somebody on the 6th floor literally got robbed. People sleeping. We had a whole entire family sleeping on our roof because the doors were broken. You could get out of the building, but you couldn't get in the building, so we had to call the fire department. Lately, we've had an 82-year-old man, heart attack victim, who apparently his doctor told him to go for a walk every day. He went for a walk, and when it was time to come back, the elevator was broke. So it took 2 tenants to literally carry this man upstairs. And he cried. From the 1st floor to the 6th floor, he cried.
Wow.
So those type of things. Somebody got shot in front of my building. And the cops came and they were asking all of the supers, which at that time we had a super and a porter on the premises. Now we have neither. They were asking them, who has the footage to this camera that's on your building? Because this is exactly where this young man was shot. And when they did get in touch with Tri-Hill told them that camera has not ever worked. It was fake and it was a deterrent. Well, if it was a deterrent, how come somebody got shot in front of the building?
Yeah, a lot to contend with. So let's talk a little bit about response and where we are right now, because obviously several complaints coming from where you are, Joy. Adam, the same way. What has been this response, and where are we with things right now?
I just a couple of months ago, we're not supposed to have washing machines in my building, and somebody above me had an illegal washing machine, so I've been having leaks. They came and the maintenance guy, he literally took down the wet sheetrock. He took it down. And I'm waiting for this guy to come back weeks later. So I called the office and I said, William came and he started the work. And, when is he going to come and plaster? They said, you need to put in another ticket. I said, another ticket? But he took my ceiling down. It's all one job. Why do I have to put in, if I'm requiring plastering and you have to remove the old plaster, he told me he had to let it dry, which made sense. Let it dry so you can plaster. Then you have to let the new plaster dry, of course, so you can paint. I had to put in 3 help tickets for that. And I think that is absolutely ludicrous. It's one job.
Adam, talk to me about gentrification, because we know that, living in New York, particularly New York City, it's not the way it used to look. And I come to the borough of the Bronx. You've got people who say it's a tale of 2 boroughs. On one side, you've got new construction. On the other side, you got public housing. You got people out here saying, we've got gentrification that we're dealing with every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. But I think, in short, Sugar Hill Capital Partners is a gentrifier extraordinaire. Myself, I've only lived in New York City for 10, 12 years. I only just came to Inwood, where I'm at now, a few years ago, and in a sense, like I am like a product of gentrification. You know, in part because I had to move from where my family was before in the city because we couldn't pay the rents, so we ended up where we are now. And if not for rent stabilization, we certainly could not continue to live in the city. But yeah, I think Sugar Hill Capital Partners, like part of their role in this process of gentrification is they are buying up huge swaths of land across northern Manhattan, but also central Brooklyn, and divesting essentially from those areas, not investing in the buildings, not investing in the neighborhoods, or certainly the people. And really, they just use these properties to squeeze wealth out of the tenants, and to get cheap loans, from their lenders that they can then use to finance other from their perspective, more lucrative projects. So in the case of like where Joy's at, like South Harlem, this is a neighborhood that over the last like 10 years, I don't know the exact numbers, but has lost a significant amount of black residents, and this is in large part due just to worsening housing conditions, ever increasing rents, and aggressive tactics to displace long-term tenants. And Sugar Hill Capitals is just one player in that. And their main way of doing it is just as Joy was describing, like in her building, in my building, and dozens of other buildings. They have tried before 2019. Their tactic was make conditions in the buildings as worse as possible, so that people want to leave or no longer want to live where their home is, and either do a buyout or just get people to do quote unquote self-evict.
Yeah, Joy, I need Joy. I want Joy to stand by for a minute because I want you. I'm coming back to you 1 second, Joy. I want to ask the question from you, Adam. Joy's talked about what's going on in her place. What are we seeing in your place?
At my place, there are like three main worries, I think. One, Joy already mentioned, which is that when they bought our building, one of the first things they did to cut expenses was they got rid of the super. So before Sugar Hill Capital bought the building, there was a live-in super in my building. Not that he was like terribly great and that everyone loved him, but he lived in the building and he was here to take care of things as needed. And that's no longer the case. And currently, the super. So for some time, our super lived in Queens, which was just not good for either us or for him. But now the super for our building manages 3 different buildings, over 120 different units, that are occupied by people who are needing his assistance with various things, and it's just too much for one person. So that's one major issue. Another is our boiler is on its last legs, and all they do is just Band-Aid repairs. We went over 20 nights, I think 25 nights this last winter, which is relatively mild. We went over 20 nights without heat. And I have 2 small children. I have a 5-year-old and an infant. And it got so bad that an HPD inspector came to our building and wrote up a violation. The violation was, he told me, they hadn't maintained the boiler, and they had actually used illegal or inappropriate materials that could have caused a fire in the boiler room. And he told me that, and the HPD inspector told me that, this could cause a fire, and it caused a fire going up for whoever lives above the boiler room. And he didn't know it, but right above the boiler room is my son's room. And so that violation has been outstanding for about 4, maybe 5 months now. And the management company, the landlord, they know about the violation. I brought it to their attention, and we have not seen action. So those are just 2 things. A third thing is that they closed our garbage chute to our building. We live in a 6-story building with an elevator, but the elevator isn't reliable. And there are people who live there for 20, 30 years, been using the garbage chute for that whole time, but now no longer have access to the garbage chute and are having to go down to the basement using the unreliable elevator, down to a basement where there are rats and cockroaches and so on. and they have no plans to fix this garbage chute.
Right. Joy, mobilization is critical, right? Getting people involved, tenant rallies,
Yes.
sharing the voice. I know that you guys had a tenant rally recently. Talk to us about how it is right now in terms of getting people mobilized and really getting their voice heard.
It's hard. I did this about 10 years ago, and I did a statewide because we actually didn't have any heat or hot water, not only over the Christmas break, but also over the Easter break. I have a granddaughter that's in a wheelchair. She can't do anything for herself, so that's not healthy. And in addition to that, we're actually just asking for basic human rights. We're paying for habitability, and that's what we want. We don't want to have to come in the building and can't get back out of the building, especially if, in case there's a fire. We have elderly people in here. We had a pregnant girl in here that got threatened by one of the people that was living on the roof. So mobilization in this building, which is only 28 units, and some of them they won't even, fill the apartments. They're warehousing, and I understand that they don't have to fill them, but they're warehousing them because with the homeless population, you would think people would be knocking down their doors to get an apartment, and we have empty ones. But I think mobilization, well, for me, everything begins with mentality. And when you're thinking that they're going to cut off my Section 8, they're gonna cut off my help that I'm getting from disability or public assistance or whatever it is that's helping them live, they're going to back down every single time. Nobody's going to put their how the money, that the little bit of money, that resources that they have, is going to put it on a line for another tenant that's saying, look, don't you see this coming? Because that's what I told them. Look, don't you see this coming? Now mobilization is better because other people are experiencing what I've been telling them. The guy on the fifth floor was totally against it. He loved, oh, no, they do. Every time I ask them to fix something, they're here, Johnny quick, until a raccoon went inside his house and attacked him. And now he's one of the first ones at the rallies.
Mm-hmm.
When you have this kind of people coming out, obviously a collective voice makes a huge amount of difference. I know rent strikes are a possibility as well. What are we looking at possibly as ways that you're looking to counter this?
I think one way forward is just to continue to grow our numbers. I'm of the belief that little will get done unless we build mass numbers of people to put pressure on those with their hands closest to the levers of power. We've done a good job, I think, of building a coalition across northern Manhattan. But part of the point of forming a tenant union is to broaden our efforts beyond just Sugar Hill Capital Partners, who's a slumlord, but there are plenty of other slumlords, and there are plenty of other people who are needing and willing to fight for better housing conditions in the city. So I think one step is just to broaden our efforts across northern Manhattan, but we're also connecting too with tenants of Tri-Hill Management and of Sugar Hill Capital Partners in central Brooklyn, because they're facing similar conditions, and they're also fed up. So I think ultimately down the line, what we need is something like a citywide tenant union, not just tenant unions for this or that neighborhood, but a tenant union across the city of working class tenants who are willing and able to fight back, through rent strikes, but through other means as well.
All righty. Well, we got to leave it there, Adam. We got to definitely leave it there, Joy, and we'll continue to follow this. Certainly, our thoughts go out to you with the situations that you're dealing with, and hopefully, we can just through this show raise our voice that maybe someone else will take note and bring correction to what's definitely needed for so many people. Thank you so much for being with us.
I just say one more thing. Awareness is the key. Awareness.
Right. We got to heighten the awareness, that's for sure. All righty. We're taking a quick break, and guess what? We'll be back with more right after this.
¿Qué color? Perfecto, mijo.
Gracias. Thank you.
What's wrong, mijo?
Donating to a pet's medical care is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
I don't know why you're so sad. You've got a roof over your head.
Bro, you gotta stop with that depression stuff. That's a white people thing.
Escúchame, en esta casa los hombres no lloran.
You all right?
It just feels like it's coming from everywhere.
Do you want to talk about it?
Thanks for hearing me out, bro. Appreciate it.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
My character, Shazam, knows all about growing up in a family full of teenage superheroes. They're bold.
Where's everyone going?
To fight crime?
Okay.
Adventurous. There's never a dull moment. And no matter what happens, they'll always have your back. All they need is a place to grow and be themselves. And the best part is, you don't have to be a superhero to adopt a teen. Learn more about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward.
And welcome back. The National Coalition on Black Civic Participation is a not-for-profit organization that's committed to enhancing civic engagement and promoting voter participation within Black and underserved communities. With almost 4 decades of experience, the coalition has successfully facilitated local, state, and national initiatives to combat the disenfranchisement of marginalized communities through active civic engagement. Joining me now and sharing more is the president and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation, Melanie L. Campbell. And Melanie, thank you for joining us.
And thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We talk about a lot of different issues that really talk about inequalities. And one of those inequalities that we like to highlight is that digital divide. And so many people feel like that's not real when it comes to communities of color. But can you put some teeth to the fact of what this digital divide is and how it really does adversely affect people of color?
Thank you. I'm going to say, you know, one of the things, you're in New York, I'm in Atlanta right now, and I spend a lot of time here and in DC. But not everyone, even in urban centers, has access. It's an affordability issue in many cases. And during the COVID pandemic, when children weren't able to go to school, you really were able to, it lifted up the disparities in health care, but also in things like access to high speed, high quality internet. So that impacted children when parents had to find a way to go into the McDonald's parking lot to know what school system you're in, whether or not they're fully wired up, if you will, when it comes to access to the internet. Or if you live in a rural community where you do have what they call internet deserts, right, where you don't have access. So that reality is exacerbated many times based on income and based on geography. And so, but the good news is there are resources well on the way in many states now, thanks to some of the federal legislation that was passed in recent times that is putting billions with a B of dollars into the system, going to states. New York, where you are, I want to say it's $600 billion is coming to New York just for the first round of funding that's happening. So, but it won't matter if you don't have access or even be able to know that there's a way to have affordability when it comes to access to the internet.
You know, nobody thought about it when we first got started about Wi-Fi and internet because it really wasn't that popular. Nowadays, it's almost like you can't live without it. You can't fill out a job application if you don't have internet access. It's just taken over society to a place where poverty and those people who've been disenfranchised, as we said in the beginning, those are the persons that are adversely affected when it comes to this.
Yeah, and then these things, right, right. These are great, right? We over-index as Black people. We over-index in access via our phones, but but not necessarily in our homes, right? And that's where there's also that divide. So that if you want to work from home, or if you need to deal with access to healthcare through online portals, in a lot of cases, it's harder to get a physical appointment with your doctor, and you may have to get a virtual appointment. But sometimes you don't have enough power on your phone to do that. And and then you have jobs where you're going to need to have a hard equipment as well as access to the internet. So there's a lot of things that are barriers that have an impact on our health, have an impact on our economic mobility, and even building wealth. And so, very, very important. We are focusing in on a new program that we're focused on Black women, heads of household, who to try to help promote and have access to the internet through our Black Women's Roundtable. We see that as part of the civic engagement work, as part of our mission, that we all need to get involved and know that the funding that's coming down, to make sure that our communities get some of those dollars, those billions of dollars, and that where they set up to expand broadband, that making sure that our communities get high quality access to the internet, along with more wealthier communities. It's a real thing
When you
when
talk,
it comes to communities.
and I don't want to cut you off, but when you talk about engagement, I think that's something that we really need to pay closer attention to, which is civic engagement. It's one of the tenets in which this show is actually formed, to promote civic engagement. And so we're glad to have you on, because you're one of the doers that are actually promoting and living with civic engagement. From your perspective, how do you define civic engagement?
Um, what I define civic engagement is making sure that you are making sure that your voice, in many cases, your vote, your issues that are concern to you as an individual as well as a collective community, are addressed. And so you can't wait on someone else. So civically engaged is really about engaging the public and the private sectors with things that are important to a community or even to an individual. And so when you say you're not engaged, then somebody else is engaged and they're pushing that issue, or they're pushing for that elected official. And if you're not involved, then, as I said, if you're not involved, someone else is making those decisions for you and your family.
Talk about somebody else making a decision. Now, can't let you leave without talking about affirmative action, the decision made by the Supreme Court that has really affected, will have, I believe, a ripple effect, not just in the educational arm, but also in the corporate and secular arm very, very heavily. Your thoughts on the end of affirmative action, particularly when it comes to college admissions?
Oh, I'm angry. It's like, ooh, can't say that word. Yeah, I'm angry. I'm angry at the U.S. Supreme Court that recently struck down affirmative action in higher education, especially in public colleges and universities. I'm angry because last I checked, Black people pay, brown people pay taxes. So when you say you're going to strike down affirmative action on the issue around race and act as if we don't still have racial disparities and racial discrimination in this country, then what you ended up having with the case, with the Harvard case, that lost, was that you actually and actually saying that you have the ability to make sure that my community won't have as much access, but yet we will be paying those same taxes for those public colleges and universities across this country, and also the access to be able to have access to private universities like a Harvard University. So it's really challenging. We know that there are a lot of other cases that came down last week, well, week before last, I'm losing track of the days. A few days ago, that also impacted student loan debt relief with a case that actually had the person didn't have any uh, um, real way of saying that needed to happen. So the Supreme Court is acting more like a legislative branch and changing and rolling back constitutional rights and freedoms in this country. So it's a really challenging time. But we've had challenging times before. So I'm a glass half full person. So I believe that we can fight back. And many times we can fight back at the ballot box.
One of the things we talk about is our young people and our youth, the fact that they are not always engaged. And I always counter that argument to say, yes, they are. I think sometimes we saw the Black Lives Matter movement and what had taken place shortly after George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, those names, and there's so many other names that we could put out there. We have a tendency to see more and more youth who are galvanized leading the fray in saying, listen, injustice against anyone is an injustice against everyone. So talk to me about what you perceive in terms of youth engagement, particularly in communities of color and blacks.
Black youth are leading the way along with young people. I'm going to go a little bit further back. After former president, whose name I don't like to mention, uh, uh, was elected in 2016, it was young people who fought back at the ballot box in 2018 and really changed the political calculus in Washington, D.C. In 2018. And so young people are organizing themselves, are very much keenly aware when you talk about the impact of Roe versus Wade, reversal of access to reproductive care, abortion, things like that, rolling back recently around student loan debt, dealing with issues around environmental justice. And so this generation is paying attention and they're showing up. And that's why you have also laws that are being passed in many states. I'm a daughter of the South, I grew up in Florida. So you're having a lot of places where, also in places like Florida and Texas and other places, where you have these voter suppression laws, not just in the South, but a large percentage of the South, where now you have state legislatures and governor's offices that are rolling back our rights. And as African Americans in this country, states' rights has never been how we've been able to gain our rights. It's been through federal intervention, in many type cases, the Supreme Court, or through executive actions through the federal government. And so right now, we're in a challenging time where you have a rise in white nationalism on top of that, and racial inequities that are really expanding. But we're gonna fight back. We're not gonna roll over. And I see young people every day, right here in Atlanta right now. Young people are not gonna roll over. And they're gonna keep fighting. So I have a lot of hope that we'll find. Every generation has to I was them some decades ago, right?
Yeah.
That reality is, and then if you stay engaged and if you start early, you'll stay engaged most of your life. And so we are encouraging that through our Black You Vote program, through our national office as well, to just make sure that we support new leadership in this movement, because you've mentioned Black Lives Matter, you have Black Voters Matter, you have down in Florida, Dream Defenders. There are many organizations, Until Freedom, that we also have to support new up and coming organizations and leaders. So I've been around a good while, and so I actively engage with everybody. And my hashtag is coalition builder. So I try to build intergenerational coalitions, multiracial at times coalitions as well, so that we can fight to make sure that we have a future that is there for these generations. And what did we do my thing is, what did I do in my dash? I'm gonna do everything I can to keep opening doors and pushing back against injustice.
What can people do in order to partner with the work of the organization? So when you talk about civic participation, how can the public participate?
They can we are they can go to of course social media is an easy way to contact us, and they can go to at ncbcp.org or through our Black Women's Roundtable or Black You Vote, and we can plug you if we're in a state. We're not all over the country as far as affiliates are concerned, but we are in 12 states, but we do a lot of national work. So if we are not somewhere, we can plug you. We have 80 national member organizations. If you can't have anything going on in our state, then we'll make sure we can try to plug you into others as a way of staying engaged. And with young people, we're getting ready to plan a National Black You Vote training conference down here in Atlanta. That'll take place in the fall. So if you want to get involved in activism, reach out to us and we'll make sure we plug you into what we're doing. But also about coalition is if we don't have a way for you to plug in, we'll try to plug you into other organizations that are part of our network.
Tell me a little bit about, before we go, how to get in contact and how people can draw near.
Yeah. Before we go, though, I did want to really get people to pay attention to what's happening. We started this conversation off because money is moving in the states. You talk about digital divide and digital equity. Please make sure your audience knows, pay attention to it, right? Find out what's happening in your local community and state. Find out from your mayor's office. Find out from your congressional office. Engage with those elected officials, those city council members. Find out where the money is going and make sure you weigh in to make sure that if you are not having good access in your local community, we're talking billions, $65 billion that's moving in across this country. And so we want to make sure that our community has access to it because this is about economic opportunity as well as quality education, as well as quality health care. There's no way to get around that. So I didn't want to leave that. And they can reach out to us again, and I'm going to give them an email that they want to email us, and that's BWR Unity, UNITY, at N as in Nancy, CBCP.org. BWR Unity at ncbcp.org. So you can join us on social or you can send us an email and we will respond.
Melanie L. Campbell, it's great to have you with us here on the Social Justice Forum. Thank you so much for being with us, and certainly appreciate your voice, the work that's going on. We hopefully will connect again soon, but great having you with us.
And I love it, and thank you for what you're doing, and I love your platform and learned about you, and call me anytime I could be on and share. Appreciate it, and it makes a difference getting the right information and getting correct information. So thank you for being that kind of resource for our communities. And honored to be on your show.
Thank you. Thank you. All righty. Well, good seeing you. All right. Well, I want to let our viewers know we've come to the end of our show today. We hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forums. Well, I want to let you know if you want to rewatch the episode, yes, the Recablecast right here is on BronxNet.org. If you want to join in on the conversation and present your point of view, well, visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We're going to continue to elevate the discussion and bring further awareness across the globe. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. God bless.